The biggest tragedy in NFL history. NFL players passing away is always tragic, but it gets even worse when it's happening on the field. During the game, professional athletes might seem like total superheroes, capable of doing anything, playing through brutal injuries and performing feats of strength. But unfortunately, back in 1971, Detroit Lions receiver Chuck Hughes suddenly collapsed during an ordinary game against the Chicago Bears. In front of a packed stadium, he tragically became the first and to date, the only NFL player to die on the field. So, who was Chuck Hughes? Hughes played his college football at UTEP, which at the time was still known as Texas Western. He spent 3 seasons with the Miners, catching a total of 168 receptions for 2,997 yards and 20 touchdowns. The vast majority of that production, 1,634 yards and 13 touchdowns, came in one dominant 1965 season. The receiver also earned All-American honors for that campaign. In 2006, UTEP inducted Hughes into their Hall of Fame, which is still live on the Miners' official website, calls him one of the most prolific receivers in school history. The Philadelphia Eagles selected Chuck Hughes out of Texas Western College in the 4th round of the 1967 NFL-AFL draft. In college, Hughes set numerous all-time records for the school, including most all-purpose yards in a single game, 401 yards, most yards per reception for a single game, 34.9 yards, and most receptions in a single game, 17 yards. In Philadelphia, Hughes combined to play as a receiver and on special teams as a kick returner. After 3 seasons with the Eagles, Hughes went to Detroit in 1970 looking for more playing time under the head coach Joe Schmidt. Hughes got precisely what he wanted for that first season with the Lions when he started 9 games as wide receiver. Unfortunately, more starts didn't necessarily translate into more catches. Hughes hauled in 8 catches for 120 yards, an impressive 15 yards per reception. In the 1971 season, Hughes saw even less time on the field until the 6th game of the season. That's when late in the game at Tiger Stadium, when the Lions trailing the Chicago Bears 28-23, he was pressed into action after Detroit receiver Larry Walton suffered an injury. As the Lions drove down the field for the potential game-winning score, quarterback Greg Landry connected with Hughes for a 32-yard strike. It was Hughes' first catch of the season. Sadly, it turned out to be the last catch of his life. 3 plays later, and just over a minute remaining in the game, Landry threw an incomplete pass to tight end Charlie Sanders near the end zone. Hughes, who was a decoy on the play, started heading back to the huddle. As he reached the 20-yard line, Hughes inexplicably collapsed to the ground, clutching his chest. Lying face down in the vicinity of deep left field, Hughes twitched uncontrollably on the soggy turf. Bears linebacker Dick Butkus stood over him. Some thought Hughes was faking an injury or that Chicago's bestial middle linebacker had finally killed someone out on the field. But Butkus immediately saw something was wrong and frantically signaled to the sidelines. Trainers and doctors raced out. A physician charged down from the stands. As more than 54,000 people silently watched, doctors beat their fists on Chuck Hughes' chest. The marbled sky hung low over the left field stands. The stadium clock showed 62 seconds left in the game. Dick Butkus, who was standing next to Hughes, motioned frantically to the Detroit sideline as the fallen player's body began twitching with convulsions. Team doctors and trainers rushed to help. An ambulance crew hurriedly drove out onto the field, placed his lifeless body on a stretcher, loaded him into the back, and drove him to Henry Ford Hospital. While doctors thought the receiver had simply injured his spleen, lungs, or kidneys, they couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong. An autopsy, however, later suggested that the receiver suffered a serious spleen injury and, due to the pain, had a heart attack. He was pronounced dead shortly after 4:30 p.m. These days, Chuck's name is mostly forgotten in the annals of NFL history. If anything, he's remembered solely for his tragic on-field death. That reality, however, overlooks his skills on the gridiron. Before we continue, if you are liking the video, please give it a thumbs up. Dick Butkus, Chicago linebacker, was the first to reach him and called for the Lions doctor from the sidelines. The stunning development sent Lions players from the team dressing room in tears. Some muttered, "He's dead, he's dead." At Henry Ford Hospital, where he was taken, Hughes was pronounced dead at 4:41 p.m., the New York Times reported. According to Carpenter's Yahoo Sports piece, an autopsy determined that one of Chuck's arteries was severely clogged and that a blood clot had broken loose, presumably from the hit on his last catch, and had become trapped in the artery, cutting off blood to the heart muscle. The report also mentioned old scarring on the posterior wall of the heart, presumably a reference to the first heart attack Hughes was believed to have had. While it's impossible to know how things could have gone differently, it's safe to assume that a proper diagnosis could have saved Chuck's life. He had a family history of heart disease. The heart attack could have happened in his kitchen. It could have happened driving his car. Instead, it happened in front of 54,000 fans at Tiger Stadium. His wife said that he would be alive today if he knew the true extent of what happened in the preseason. Hughes' siblings believe, at the very least, that he would have stopped playing football. "I wish somebody could have told him in September, stop playing football. Don't get that blood clot in your artery and just go play golf on the golf course and live your life," his wife says. He was 28 years old, in top flight shape, and could run all day long. No one suspected, doctors or anyone, he would have a heart problem because he had been complaining of some chest pains. He had a slightly high elevated temperature. Maybe someone would have suspected it in somebody who was older, but not in a professional athlete who was 28 years old in the prime of their life. Jeff Haig, a writer who was working on a biography of Hughes, said. Several days later after his death, head coach Joe Schmidt and the entire Lions team attended Hughes' funeral in San Antonio. Hughes left behind his wife and son, who was days shy of his second birthday. On the day before he died, Chuck and his wife Sharon went to an afternoon party at the house of a Lions teammate friend. Several of the players' families were there. She remembers having fun, but she could tell Chuck did not feel well. His color was bad, she recalled. They argued over the gum their 2-year-old son was chewing. Chuck said a child so small shouldn't have gum. When they got home, Chuck kissed Sharon goodbye and went to check into the hotel where the team stayed on nights before home games. But something was amiss. Chuck didn't call Sharon that night as he always did when he checked into his room. Years later, teammates told Haig that Chuck was ill and had thrown up several times that evening, yet nobody called Sharon to tell her that. She was left alone with the silence of the phone that didn't ring and the silly argument over chewing gum. An insurance company set up a $10,000 trust fund for Hughes' son. His widow filed a $21.5 million malpractice lawsuit against Henry Ford Hospital in 1972 for not diagnosing his condition when he was hospitalized after complaining of chest pains earlier in the season. The lawsuit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount of money. In memory of the Detroit Lions player, the organization retired Hughes' number 85 and annually gave an award to the most improved player in his name. His greater legacy was a newfound attitude among many of his teammates, including Lions punter Herman Weaver, who was recently asked about that dark day at Tiger Stadium. "I try to put a smile on my face every day because we're not guaranteed tomorrow," he said. Hughes grew up in a family of 15 children, first in Breckenridge, Texas, and then Abilene. He was late to football for a Texas kid, not picking it up until he was in the 6th grade. At first, he was a running back before moving to receiver, where he quickly learned to run precise routes. And once he learned them, he practiced them again and again and again. Stories spread around the town of the young receiver who never stopped playing football. Because of a glitch in his transfer from Breckenridge to Abilene, Chuck was too old to play his senior year of high school, and yet he insisted on practicing with the team, simply to stay sharp. He had to get better and better. His brother Johnny, who played cornerback, says he learned more from Chuck than he ever did from a coach. Chuck insisted on going against him in practice, showing him how to stop certain patterns and telling him the things receivers hated defensive backs doing. Bum Phillips, then the coach at Texas Western in 1962, gave Hughes a scholarship, but after Phillips left, the next coach, Warren Harper, rescinded the offer, making him earn a spot as a walk-on. Hughes not only made the team, but he also set numerous UTEP records, including most receptions, receiving yards, and all-purpose yards in a game, and is third on the school's list of career receiving yards. And that was the time when the Philadelphia Eagles picked him in the 4th round of the 1967 NFL Draft. What do you think about this tragedy of NFL history? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video, and thanks for watching.